Hello. Thank you so much for joining us for the Peculiar Patriot and for this post-show dialogue. My name is Franny Shepard-Bates, and I'm the director of Detroit Public Theater's Shakespeare in Prison program, and I am very excited to be part of this with you tonight. We have about 30 minutes together in this room to talk, and so I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to turn this over to our talkback facilitator, Jocelyn Walker.
Thank you so much, Franny. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Walker. I am an alum of the Shakespeare in Prison program. I started during my incarceration back in 2013, and now I continue the work here being home. I've been released since 2015, and I've been working with Shakespeare Reclaimed, doing different activities to continue to bring awareness to these type of topics that we witnessed on tonight. Ms. Lisa's performance is absolutely amazing. It's super powerful, and I know it's a lot to take in, especially for her, but also for the audience. If anyone has experienced incarceration, or if you know someone who's experienced incarceration, reliving those experiences that she portrayed tonight, I know it can be a lot. So if anyone is interested in just shouting out a word that they might have grasped from watching her performance tonight, please feel free. I know it is extremely hard to see, but it's powerful. So if anyone wants to share any feelings that they might have felt on tonight, please feel free to do so. You don't have to be scared.
Intense. It's intense.
Definitely intense is a great word. I also would like to say that I felt, aside from being intense and powerful, I feel like it was very impactful and informative, especially for individuals who are not privy to the information that she shared on tonight about incarceration, about the experiences in the visiting room, for those coming and for those who are there. So I have some other great panelists up here with me that I would like to share. We have Brian Jones. Our panelist, Brian Jones, may not be familiar to our audience, but he was a part of a special performance of the Peculiar Patriot. After decades behind the drapes of wrath that is incarceration in this country, he is now free and making the most of the remainder of his life. Our second panelist is Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker was born and raised on the west side of Detroit. He is a returning citizen, released from the Michigan Department of Corrections in August of 2022, after serving a 46 years and 11-day sentence. Let's give another round of applause for him. So as we continue our conversation, introducing our panelists, the two of these gentlemen here were juvenile lifers, and I want them to just give an I'm sorry about that. I have the incorrect information. I would like you guys to speak or just share your feelings towards the awareness of the juvenile lifers and the impact with the Supreme Court, because I'm pretty sure that a lot of individuals aren't privy to that information.
Good evening. The juvenile lifers means, the decisions regarding them means quite a bit to me, because I know so many of them. I worked with a lot of them as the decisions were coming down, because one of the things that we don't necessarily portray or see portrayed in the play is that you can be whoever you want to be while you're in prison. But when it came time, when these decisions started coming down, you have to start being authentic. And that's one of the things, one of the words I would use for this play is authentic. You have to start talking about your case, something that we also don't do. We present as little of who we are while we're inside, but your character is still showing. So in 2012, the decision came down that said that the juveniles can't automatically be sentenced to mandatory life without the possibility of parole. In 2016, they finally acknowledged that in Michigan. That means 4 years later, they finally started saying, okay, we'll start looking at these guys. So we started getting ready because they had to go back to court. They had to go for a Miller hearing. And we actually designed a program where bring your papers out. The papers are what you're going to be judged about. And I took those papers and developed a line of questioning that sought to have you acknowledge the harm that you've done, because that's something else that we also did not necessarily do. And as a 20-year-old who had committed the same type of crimes as these juveniles, I made sure that I put myself in a position to just push them, because we're good at pushing back. We're good at minimizing. We're good at rationalizing why I would do something heinous. And in actuality, there's no reason. Citizens go through difficulties all the time, and they choose to go through it and be better for it than to hurt someone. The biggest issue regarding juveniles right now is still some of them 11 years later, who are still in there and have not been resentenced after the decision said it was unconstitutional. So that's my spiel about the juveniles. I don't know if you want to share anything.
Thank you for coming, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm not affected or impacted by the juvenile lifers bill or situation. Even though I know countless men who are continuing to suffer as a result of what Brian just explained. My reason for being here tonight is to expand my borders and my consciousness in terms of interacting with civilian population and just a part of my reacclimation to society overall. As the mediator indicated, I've been home now for 6 months, and I'm grateful. But I was gone for 46 years. So just, to give that some space in your head, just subtract 46 years from however old you are, and just imagine what you were doing 46 years ago. But that was then, and this is now. One of the extraordinary things about the play to me, that it impacted me most intensely, is I was on both sides of that visit. I was being visited by family members who, for the most part, are no longer with me. The overwhelming majority of my family has gone. But I was also on the other side of that table, in my mind's eye, and as I listened to people explain to me how they were impacted by coming to see me. For example, one of my sisters, I had twin sisters, and they supported me throughout my entire incarceration. But the oldest of the two, one day I asked her, why did I see her so sporadically? You don't live far from, at the time I was in Detroit, and you don't live too far from here, so why don't I see you more frequently? And she just honestly told me, I compelled her. I hate coming to see you in there. And as you witnessed from the play, the intensity and the impact of the waiting and the anticipation and the interference and the disrupting of relationships from the staff and from the bars and the noise and the clinging and the restrictions, the disruption of normal interactions between human beings. You can't hold and touch hands, and you can't kiss, and I'm not talking about in a lustful kind of way, but just normal social interaction, just reaching out and being compassionate. That was taken away from me. So as I watched that, I almost revisited, I was back in those situations. But now I'm encouraged to just simply be. And a part of me being here tonight is just to be exposed to the opportunity to answer questions or to share thoughts and ideas, to create a sense of normalcy within a situation that makes absolutely no sense. Because a lot of the figures that she gave tonight, a lot of the facts that she explained are unexplainable, except when we start thinking about dollars and cents, the bottom line. So again, I thank you for participating. I welcome any question that you may have, and I'm encouraged to answer. Thank you for listening.
I thank you both for what you guys just shared. My experience when I went into prison, I was 19 years old when I got sentenced, so I wasn't a juvenile, but I was still very young. And I stayed in a unit with a lot of women who were there for my sentences or experiencing a longer amount of time. And although it wasn't my experience, I still felt very impacted by the situation that I know that they had to endure. That process of knowing that you're in a state of adolescence, but you're still being charged with someone who has the capacity to even realize that they committed the thing that they did, I feel like it's extremely harsh. And to not even experience what the situation, but to still feel the situation of the ones that I came in contact with while in there was very hard. And I know being in incarceration, and you spoke on it, Mr. Johnny, about the impact that our families feel when they come to visit us, and the impact that we feel is dehumanizing. I'm sorry. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the situations while in there that we felt that made us feel dehumanized.
Well, just for some perspective, when I entered prison, I was 21 years old. And even though I had been, kind of a rascal coming up, kind of rebellious and confrontational and resistant to instruction, the normal childhood life kind of thing. Those particulars that I just described are normal for adolescents in civilian community. There's not so much in prison. So one of the things that happened to me was I went inside. I went into Jackson prison. And unfortunately for me, my brother was my rap partner, co-dependent. And he was 17, turning 18. So I had a sense of responsibility. Now here I am in a new environment, scared to death, but I'm acting as if I'm all that in a bag of chips. Because I grew up on the west side of Detroit, and I've heard a lot about what happens in Jackson prisons. Or it doesn't have to be Jackson, but prison, period. So I'm scared, and I'm anticipating confrontations, and one of the things that I do is that I create a situation that I can control. I'm used to confrontation, I'm used to fighting. So I create a situation, I get in a fight, and I get segregated from the normal population. But I'm also segregated from my brother. But even in that, I'm still out of sync. And I can't find normal. Because how do you make normal in an abnormal environment? And I was resistant at that stage. I was resistant to instruction and constructive influence. So, and that was just part of my makeup, my way of being able to manage how I existed. If I listen, if I yield, where I came from would indicate that I'm soft. I don't want to be soft. And this is no place to be designated as soft. Because that brings about a whole new spectrum of challenges to be soft in prison. And you can just use your imagination with that. But as I continue, one of the unfortunate things that happened to me, being in that state of mind and being in a position where I was easily influenced or put off so that I feel challenged and I needed to prove myself. I came to prison, not with 46 years, I came with 15 to 40. But 10 months later, I made a poor choice and a man died. And then I was sentenced to life. So now I'm doing a life, 15 to life, 40 to life, which is principally why I stayed in prison as long as I did. But what happened to me after I fell down that well of resistance to instruction and positive influence is that I just did whatever the hell I wanted to do. And it created smorgasbords of issues for me. I ended up like Larry in segregation. But one of the sad things for me is that most of my life I felt alienated and isolated. And one of the persons that I got along with best was me. So isolating me, contrary to how the impact that it had on Larry, I was okay. If you restrict and restrain me and put me by myself, that's okay. But I'm grateful that God blessed me with people who, no matter where I was and when I was, they breathed redemption, they breathed a positive a word so that they just kept knocking and kept trying, kept twisting, kept sharing, kept showing that way, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, we recognize that that's insanity. But it wasn't until people like this gentleman here, because unfortunately, we shared quite a few years together in various places. But people like Brian, who I marveled when I first met Brian, because I didn't know him before I came to prison. How can you not do what I did and we end up in the same place? Brian has always been a brilliant young man. Always focused on education and focus on education and doing well. And as a result of a poor choice, circumstances befell him. But for me, as I've explained before, I gravitated towards getting into stuff. But we ended up in the same place. And a part of the breaking of my resistance to just considering doing things differently was when I started listening to fellows like Brian, who revealed that what I'm saying, he didn't communicate this to me, this is what I discerned from how we talked and how I perceived his life. If you choose to do something other than what you've been doing, if you choose good over bad, if you choose to recognize that people care about you, if you choose to stop beating yourself down, better things happen for you. And long story short, years later, when I went to prison, I used to use drugs recreationally, and I was to the mind that, whatever it was, I'll try it. I wasn't a hippie, but I had that mentality, let's see where it takes us. But there came a time when even that wasn't suitable, because the conflict and the weight and the burden of just living life on life terms in prison. I left a community where I had no brothers and sisters. I had no nieces and nephews, and now they're starting to have children. I'm starting to lose members of my family, and I want to do things differently. People are attracted to me, gravitating towards me, expressing interest in helping me. I have opportunities to be a part of programming. I have an opportunity to be a part of church communities, and I start making those choices. I stop using drugs. I start participating and facilitating in positive, constructive groups. And those are the things that help resurrect me from a bad place. And even though it took 20 years after that effective change for me to subsequently be released, it happened nevertheless. And just like when the actress tonight asked the woman she was visiting to promise that she wouldn't hurt herself, I had to promise myself that I wouldn't continue to hurt me. And I kept my promise. See, and as a result of that, a lot of good things happened. A lot of good people reached out. A lot of people spoke well of me. A lot of people have introduced me into opportunities since I've been home, and I'm grateful. But everything is still brand new. The world that I left doesn't exist anymore, and but I'm encouraged, as I've mentioned several times before, to just realize that, be grateful. Though I've come through the valley of the shadow of death, I feel no evil. But I'm just grateful, and I'm blessed, and I remain encouraged.
I gotta go behind that.
I'll reiterate the question. I know I asked it a minute ago, but he touched base on some of those things that we feel being incarcerated. I asked, what are some of the experiences that we experienced that created a situation where we felt dehumanized?
Walking through those gates absolutely makes you feel dehumanized. When you are stripped of everything and given a number, you feel dehumanized. it's, it's not often that it happens at that moment. But if you're honest with yourself, that dehumanizing came at your own hand.
Thank you so much. I have to meet some, I just have to say this brother right here, I can't stay for the talk back, but I have this brother right here. I have to tell our story, how we met, how we know each other. 15 years ago, 17 years ago, I performed the Peculiar Patriot at Mound Correctional. And this brother, he was serving time at Mound, and he did all the PR. He put up all the flyers. He made sure was it the gymnasium? He made sure it was packed. He played the pre-show music because he's an amazing musician. So he was on the keyboard playing, the nice music while the guys were coming into the gym. I was just so impressed with just how he really was so supportive of the play and wanted to make sure that it had the best audience and support while I was inside. And he wrote me afterwards to let me know what the guys thought about it. He even started a letter writing campaign to Jay-Z and Russell Simmons because he wanted to help me get a DVD of it. And he said, oh, you need the funding, and so I'm gonna write Jay-Z and Russell Simmons. So he did all of this amazing support 17 years ago, and then we had this full circle moment, and I'm here, and Franny from Shakespeare in Prison said, Brian Jones, he said he hopes you remember him. I said, do I remember? Then he was like my PR agent at now. Of course I remember him. And so he's here. So this is a full circle moment because he saw the play when it was just me on stage and a quilt. I didn't have none of this, no sound. So he saw it raw. It was still developing. And now you're home.
I work for Chamber Music Detroit, and we present chamber music concerts in this region. One of the things that we started doing because of the pandemic is we started webcasting all of our concerts. So I brought Steve here tonight so he could see you do this, because I still want to make sure you get a DVD done. So we're going to talk to the producers on Monday.
He was like this 17 years ago on the inside, like writing letters to Jay-Z and Russell Simmons. I'm like, who does that? Like,
it's still a goal. And to me, it's still necessary because we need to spread the message that she's giving beyond her physical presence. So,
Okay, thank you all. Thank you.
I guess that's the human side of it. I was saying that if when you're honest with yourself, you admit that dehumanizing came at your own hand, and that's part of learning or being challenged at some point, which is how it happened with me, to love yourself before you can ever love somebody else. And that honesty just keeps chipping away at those excuses that you make. And okay, I'm ready. No.
No, you're not.
Shame on you for even bringing that up, because when you say, I have patience, then it will be tried. When you say that you have discipline, it will be tried. When you say that you are forgiving, it will be tried. And it gets tried and tried and tried until you get to the point where they don't view you as a threat anymore. And 46 years later, they let you go. Now, mind you, the reason why I mentioned this brother as one of the 3 people who were my examples, I did this last week. The reason why I mentioned him is because he is very instrumental in why I'm sitting in this chair right now. I give him all the credit in the world because in 1992, he counseled me, kind of with the same story, early version that he just shared with you. If we're paying attention, if we're being honest with ourselves, we can learn from somebody else instead of having to learn on our own. And when he told, the question was, and then what? I'm ready to go out there and I'm gonna create a situation, I'm ready for this conflict. And then what? How far are you willing to take it? I'm willing to take it all the way. And then what? At what cost are you willing to go? How far? And then he tells me his story that he just shared with you. It's just a short version of it. Because you can't control how somebody else responds to the challenge that you create. So I backed up. I didn't get another sentence on top of the one that I already had. Because I didn't know what that other person was going to do. Didn't necessarily look soft, thank you. But I did remember that going forward. And I didn't have to explain that over and over and over again every time I went to the parole board. I just had to try and explain why I'd done the first one.
I am going to say one quick thing because we're shortly wrapping up, but I know for my experience that I felt, along with what you guys already touched base on, a situation of being dehumanized, it's definitely coming into those gates and being stripped of everything you're used to, from how you eat, how you receive health care, dental care, the things that you wear, the people that you're in commune with every single day. Like every single point and every day in there is a process of dehumanization. And the fact that our families came in and had to see us in those visiting rooms, they experienced it too. I know my family as well. There was one particular moment when my sister, they gave her a hard time about something that she had on, which was definitely age appropriate when she did finally get back there. But that was just a simple thing. Like the fact that they had to experience what we experienced as well, I know made it harder to leave out those doors when they had to. In closing, I just wanted to say one thing. Of course, go ahead. My last statement, I'll say I did.
Okay. One of the things that when we talked about the juveniles, and I talked about Johnny Walker here being a second-degree lifer who was similarly situated as me. One of the reasons why the juveniles was really important to me is because I was one of those people that Lisa was talking about who takes the plea just to get away from that more severe punishment. So I was 20. When the decision was made about the juveniles, it said 17. So even if they had made this decision and I had not taken that plea, I would be 3 years too far gone for that to have any kind of impact on me. So what Steve and I did is create a situation where we started showing these 17-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 16-year-olds who have gotten out, and it's called Fallen Petals of Nameless Flowers. It's actually on YouTube. It's a original commission that we put together. We had a poet write a libretto for it, and then we had Jeff Scott, an amazing writer, created the original music composition, and we premiered it 2 years ago. Last April. Oh, last April, sorry. Fallen Petals of Nameless Flowers is important because Steve summed it up better than I ever could have when he introduced it. He said, "There but for the grace of God go I." And every time I watch, I still watch it. Every time I watch it and I hear him make that introduction, I know that there are others who are similarly situated who are still waiting for that relief, who are 19 and do not have the same mentality, but are awaiting the justice scale to swing that pendulum to include them. It just picked up 18-year-olds. I always had one young man who was 18 and 10 days when he committed his crime, which means 2 weeks ago, he would have been eligible for relief. And now, because he had a birthday, he's suddenly more mature. It doesn't happen like that. So, again, I just wanted everyone to know, Fallen Petals of Nameless Flowers, it is on YouTube, it is on our website, Chamber Music Detroit. I do have information that I can pass out. I think I have enough for everybody if you're interested. And come join us, and we can always talk about this in the future.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to ask everybody, please continue to keep this conversation going as we wrap up tonight. This is something that a lot of more people need to be privy to, so continue to do this work that we're doing on tonight. If you guys are interested in teaming up with any other groups that are helping people that are incarcerated get reacclimated, we have a QR code out in the lobby that you guys can scan and connect with anybody who is doing the work. I thank you guys again. Thank you guys again. I hope you all have a great evening.
Thank you.